This is the Raising Rebellion podcast, episode number 2.
Welcome to the Raising Rebellion Parenting Podcast, where we will explore how to help kids seek purpose and passion, challenge society's expectations, and avoid a standardized life. Now here's your host, Paul H.K.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for episode number 2. This one is a great one for you parents out there that have kids who are good academic students in school. Today, I talk with Danielle Saz. Danielle was a straight-A student growing up and was told all her life that she was smart, so she had very high expectations placed on her, and in turn, her placing on herself. She knew at a very early age that she wanted to become a lawyer, so she graduated in the top 10% of her class in law school and found success very soon after graduation. However, one thing happened that she didn't anticipate. She realized that law was not for her and that she had made a very big mistake. She shares her story of how she found new meaning in her life and provides us with a lot of great insights on finding that purpose that comes from within, including what she believes to be a radical and revolutionary idea to finding happiness. So without further ado, here's my interview with Danielle. Okay, we are here with Danielle Saz, psychotherapist. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
All right, great. Me too. Let's jump right into it. Danielle, can you, let's start at the very beginning. Can you tell me about your childhood? What it was like growing up? What kind of family environment you had? School, the whole thing.
Sure. So I was born in a small town north of Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I grew up in a very predominantly Mormon little small town. Both of my parents were descendants of, or are descendants of, Mormon pioneers. So that was sort of a big part of not only my family culture, but sort of just the culture around me growing up. Mm-hmm. And I lived there all the way until I was 18 years old. One thing about that culture that I think probably relates to what we'll be talking about is that there's a really strong emphasis on service to other people. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't just in the culture. That was also a big part of my family. Mm-hmm. My paternal grandfather and my maternal grandmother and grandfather both had been in kind of public service jobs their whole career. Mm-hmm. And that's also what my mom has done her whole career. But even outside of that, there was just always this emphasis on trying to help people when you could. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Did you guys do stuff as family? Sorry to interrupt you. Did you guys do stuff as family that were always service oriented? Was that just part of, was it kind of ingrained in the culture, or were you guys actively doing service related things for other families as you were growing up, or for other people?
Both. It is such a big part of the culture that it's almost like you don't even think of it when you're there. But like, I just noticed even when we go with my family now, mm-hmm. my kids and my husband, when we go to visit, mm-hmm. it's like, without even thinking about it, if there's snow, my dad will just take a snowblower and go remove all the snow from all the widows' driveways in the neighborhood. Like, it's just not even like something he thinks about. It's just, he just does it. It's just part of how he mm-hmm. lives. Mm-hmm. And, my mom knows her elderly neighbors well, or if somebody's sick, and part of that is kind of just built into the church culture. Like, mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay, somebody has a baby, automatically people. And then I would say that was a big part of my maternal grandfather. We were at their house a lot growing up. Mm-hmm. And that was always a big part of just how he lived mm-hmm. too. And I think a lot of he died about 15 years ago, mm-hmm. but it's kind of become a family motto of WWGD, what would grandpa do? Because he he was just somebody that was so much a part of who he was. It was like breathing for him, just helping other people.
So great.
Yeah.
We could learn
Yeah.
from your grandfather here in Los Angeles.
Well, it's something that I think about a lot now that I have kids, because I am no longer a practicing Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
And it is much harder to organically build in those opportunities for service than when it's more kind of structured, or there's like a community in place that facilitates that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of in a different community, a different part of society, right? That
Definitely.
A lot different.
Yeah, we don't know very many of our neighbors, unfortunately.
Right.
Whereas, like, that's so different than how I grew up. We just knew everybody that lived around us.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Now, were you always do you remember what you wanted to be when you were a kid?
I did. I do.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be the president of the United States.
Fantastic.
Really modest goals.
Yeah.
That I had.
There's still time. There's still time. Hillary might pave the way for you.
I knew that in the kind of working towards that, I knew from a pretty young age I wanted to go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother and my mom both worked in the court system. My mom still works in the court system,
mm-hmm.
and they both for their entire careers. So a lot of times after school, I would be at the courthouse. I could go sit in the courtroom if I wanted to. My mom sometimes with filing, and I really just liked the house. And so that's what I want to do. I want to be a lawyer.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. That's very interesting. And I think the audience will find out why as we keep talking here. Okay. Now, were you always a good student, like through high school?
Yes, I always was. I was always very much a perfectionist. And we haven't talked much about this, but my home life growing up was a little bit chaotic. Mm-hmm. My parents married when they were not on the young side for Utah, but by today's standards, young, 22, maybe 21.
Mm-hmm.
Had me when they were 23. They got divorced. They got remarried. They divorced again. They remarried each other again.
Wow.
Remarried. Yeah. So this is the third time they've been married. But for a large portion of my sort of young years, they were in some state of flux. Mm-hmm. And school was kind of like a haven for me.
Gotcha.
I really appreciated kind of the structure and consistency and the rules. It felt like a very safe place. So I excelled at school.
Okay, got it. So it was almost a little bit of an escape.
Definitely.
For you. You threw yourself, some people throw themselves into work when they're having issues in their marriage. You happen to throw yourselves into school. Okay. Super interesting. Okay, now I read that you completed 2 bachelor degrees in 3 years with a 4.0 GPA, super overachiever. What did you get your 2 degrees in?
I have a degree in women's studies and in political science.
Okay, got it. And that was still always with the goal of becoming a lawyer all through.
Yes.
Okay, all through high school, all through college. That was what you thought you were going to do.
That's what I thought I was going to do. Yeah. It was like everything was kind of building towards that.
Okay. Now, I know you said you threw yourself into it, but did school always come pretty easy to you, or was it just that you were so focused that you worked really hard at it and therefore you were good at it?
I don't think that I had to work very hard at it until maybe a little bit later in my graduate school years.
Okay. Up
until probably graduate school, yeah, it felt like it came fairly easy for the most part, with the exception of math, specifically calculus.
Right.
And that was like it's something that I think about a lot now, because I think the way that I think I'd grown up having people tell me repeatedly that I was smart. And that became a really big part of my idea of who I was. Mm-hmm. And the way that I made sense of that as a kid was that if I'm not good at something, or if I don't get something on the first try, or if I have to work at it at all, I should just give up, because that means I'm not smart at it if it doesn't come easily.
Totally. You're getting all this praise, and then there's one piece, right?
Yes. And so when this happened, and my junior year of high school, I was in an AP calculus class. And it was one of the first times where I felt really like I struggled. It was really hard for me. And I felt like I just wanted to give up, because I was like, and I really developed this idea of myself as somebody who couldn't do math.
So how did you get through that, let's say that year?
That year, I think I just ground it out. It felt like there were no other alternatives. But I never took math again after that.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was the last time I ever took math.
Okay. Now, AP Calculus, I mean, that's not a bad place to stop taking math.
It wasn't, I kept going for a while, but yes, I never, it's funny to me in retrospect, because I'm like, well, the fact that I was in AP Calculus as a junior in high school, that I was, had some natural aptitude for math.
Right.
And if I might have not been so scared of failing or not excelling, it would have been interesting to see what I could do, but I was terrified of failing.
Looking back, do you think you can maybe look to that particular experience and sort of gain something from that? Like, you learned how to grind it out, right? There's some grit. You learned how to dig it out, and, it's something you're not good at. You struggle a little bit, but you found a way to get through that. I mean, that's something you can draw on, right?
Yes. And I mean, one of the things that I really draw from on that experience is thinking about how I want to parent and how I want to praise my kids, which is more for effort than for just being smart. I really make a deliberate attempt to, praise when they are trying, no matter what the results are.
Right. Now, did you get any kind of, during that time, you're used to, at that point, you're used to just getting praise, you're smart, you're doing great, just straight A's, whatever. When there was a little bit of a struggle there, did you get any kind of different feedback as you were going through that, or no?
Well, I didn't get A's.
Right.
That was like, I mean, that was devastating for me.
For you?
My parents didn't even really care.
Oh, okay. Okay. They had their own stuff they were going through.
Yeah. Right. But for me, I was like really devastated by this.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. You are human. You actually did struggle through something in school.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you finished college, and after college, you took a year off to go do volunteer work with AmeriCorps. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. To me, that almost feels a little counterintuitive for somebody who is such an overachiever educationally to all of a sudden go and take a year off. Almost you would think that somebody would just go dive in and go get a 6-figure paying job, whatever. What do you think led you to, which I love, by the way, that you're so far ahead of the curve taking a gap year, right? I mean, Malia Obama's making it popular now, but you did this, back then. What do you think drew you to take that year off, first of all, and second, to go do it with AmeriCorps?
Well, so Bill Clinton had announced AmeriCorps when I was in middle school. And I think already at that point, maybe I was still more in line with my parents' more conservative politics, but part of sort of my attempt to kind of assert my individuality was becoming really liberal politically. And when he announced the AmeriCorps, I was probably 13, and I just was like, I want to do that. I know that I want to do that. At some, like if it's taking a year off during college or a year off afterwards, that's something that I'm going to do. And it worked really well with my sort of master plan of becoming a lawyer, because I knew that it would probably be helpful in terms of law school admissions.
Right.
That they would be interested in somebody who hadn't just come straight through, who'd like done something else outside of undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it fit with really wanting to do something service oriented too.
Right. Of course. Now, so you said that it was around age 13 that you found out about it, and all of a sudden it just hit you, right?
Yeah.
That was something you wanted to do. Can you think of why at that age, 13, when I was 13, there's no way I would have, everything was just, okay, great, let's go try that. I'm going to play some video games. Nothing hit me at 13 like that, right? Do you think you can identify what was it about that at age 13 that made you want to just, wow, that I want to do? The service aspect to it, maybe a little bit?
Sure, it was the service aspect was a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
There was, I think, something really inspiring to me of thinking of like being part of this kind of national group of people who wanted to do something to help make things better.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt really exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say those were probably the main things.
Okay. That's fantastic. I wish I would have been that self-aware, when I was 13.
I mean, it definitely had a double-edged sword, right? Because it was like being so fixated on this like goal.
Yeah.
There were some great things about that. And then there were some kind of darker sides where it was like hard for me to play or have fun, because everything was so goal directed.
Right. I gotcha. Okay. Speaking of the darker side, let's get into your time when you worked as a lawyer.
Uh-huh.
You worked as a litigator.
Yeah.
Here in Los Angeles. Looks like you worked for several different law firms, international law firms. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did during that time?
Mm-hmm. After my first year after law school, I clerked for a federal judge here in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And then and maybe backing up because it's part of this theme.
Yeah.
My intention in going to law school was still to work in the public interest.
Mm-hmm.
That, I had that kind of politics goal, but part of the way that I saw towards that was working in the public interest.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason why I chose to go to law school at UCLA was because I've been admitted to a public interest law and policy program that is part of the law school.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated from that program. But during the course of the time that I was there, I was, now in retrospect, I was like, I was so young when I went to law school. I was like maybe 21 or 22 when I started law school.
Mm-hmm.
And the pull of the money was strong.
Sure.
So I ended up, after my first year of law school, getting an offer at a law firm. And it just so happened that during the time I was in law school, like the starting salary when I began law school versus what the average salary was coming out of a law school like UCLA 3 years later,
mm-hmm.
it had about doubled.
And what was that? What was that
So
figure?
it had started at 80,000 and it jumped to about 160,000. So for like a 23-year-old kid, that is just crazy money.
Jackpot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I was going to use a different term, but we'll go with jackpot.
Yeah. So
kids might be listening. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? But I definitely didn't have the wisdom at that point to be like, no, like, let me just sort of like stick with this public interest plan. And sort of like in my defense, a lot of public interest places don't necessarily want to hire somebody until they've worked at a firm, because it's really expensive to train a young lawyer. And so if you can learn some of that stuff working at a big firm and go somewhere else, then that's sometimes more appealing to a public interest agency. But anyway, so I felt that really strong pull to the money. And I ended up working at that same firm where I had spent my first summer. I worked there for about a year, and then I worked at a big trial litigation firm downtown for a few years. And basically, well, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So I was just litigating during most of that time, mostly in the context of the massive bankruptcies that were happening around that time. So I worked Enron, Lehman Brothers, like the Tribune bankruptcy, most of the really big bankruptcies around that time I worked on in some capacity.
Wow. So that led to no balance whatsoever of work life.
No.
I mean, was the money was paying you well for that imbalance, but about how many hours on average do you think you were working a week?
I mean, that's the interesting thing about litigation, because it's like you'll go through like crazy busy periods, and then sometimes it'll just drop off. But during busy times, and the last case that I worked on, I worked for like maybe like 3 months straight without a full day off. And most of those days were like 12+ hour days, just really, really intense hours. It wasn't always like that.
Right.
But
so that kept going for a while, for a few years, and eventually you came to the realization that you wanted a little bit more work-life balance, and that you maybe wanted to do something a little bit more fulfilling for yourself. Is that right? How do you think you kind of came to that realization?
That's a good question. So I would say that my experience was that pretty much the first day, even like working as a summer associate at a law firm, I kind of have a real strong sense in my gut, like, oh no, I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
This isn't the right path for me. But it felt at that point like I couldn't get off. Those were sort of, obviously that isn't accurate, but that was the way that I saw things at that point. Of like, I'm on this train, I just got to keep going. And so, I kept working about maybe like 4 or 5 years in, I started thinking a little bit more seriously about, I can't keep doing this. I am so unhappy. That was one part of me. But then another part of me was thinking, okay, but I just want to once I get a little bit more money in the bank, then I'll feel better about leaving or figuring out what to do next. Yeah. There was always some kind of arbitrary thing of, once I get here, okay, then I'll back off, or I'll take a step back. So even, when I left sort of my second to last position as a litigator to jump to another firm, I thought, okay, I'm just going to go to this firm. I'd gotten this offer that was really hard to turn down. I'll work there for a year. I'll, get a little bit more money in the bank. And then at the end of that year, then that's when I'm going to walk away. And I got a year into it, and I was like, okay, 6 more months. I'm just going to do 6 more months. And it was right at that point when I got fired. Oh, okay. Which even now, when I read the questions you sent me, I'm like, oh, am I going to talk about that? Because I feel when it happened, it definitely triggered a lot of shame for me. And sort of like my perfectionist tendencies. It's like, oh no.
Did you view that as a failure? Like you failed in some way? Yeah.
Part of me did. But then another part of me was like,
thank God.
Felt like a gift.
Yeah.
Yes. That if this wouldn't have happened, who knows how long I would have just kept, on this train that I knew wasn't the path, but just felt like I couldn't walk away.
Yeah.
So it ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me. And it is a really good reference point for me in terms of thinking about, quote unquote failure and what that looks like and how great that can be sometimes.
Right. It at that time of when it happens, it kind of same thing for me. I was fired once or let go, whatever. And, at that moment you're kind of like, oh, what am I going to do? Yeah. This was at the point of, economy was collapsing, unemployment was double digit. Yeah. It was, end of 2008. So it was the worst time to try and go back out and look for another job, But looking back, it was I was unemployed for like 9 months. But looking back, it was the absolutely best thing that could have happened because it took my life on a better path,
Yeah.
Okay. So it was almost like something kind of, nature kind of did that for you in order to kind of take you down a different path.
I want to think about it. Yes. Something happened where it was like, okay, this is, you're not going to step away. Okay. Well,
right. We're going to do this for you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So after that, is that when you kind of took some time off? Because then, I know you made a decision to go into psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So to go back to school, is that how much time did you take? Like, were you already thinking that was kind of the path you wanted to go down, or did you just kind of take some time off to think about it? And
I had an inkling that maybe this would be something that I was interested in doing, but there were other things that I was considering as well. But what I decided when it happened, it happened sort of mid 2009, also kind of in the midst of the recession. But I did end up getting like a really generous severance package and I had this money saved. So I was like, I'm going to give myself a year. Like, I'm just going to give myself this year, this gift of a year to focus on figuring it out, what I really want to do. And I realized I was extremely fortunate to be in that position where I could even take that time. But allowing myself that time of doing a lot of inner work, that was a big part of what I did during that time. And a lot of reflection, a lot of trying to connect with, okay, what is it that I really want to do without kind of these expectations that wherever they came from, it wasn't me. And so I gave myself that whole year. I then, met with people in different jobs that I was considering, kind of researched what would the education kind of trajectory look like for these different jobs. And like, even going into it, there was still so much fear. I think back now and it was like, I was so, I feel like probably most of the time I was working as an attorney, and probably for a long time before that, I was in a fight or flight state a lot of the time. And I attribute that to the reason why I had a hard time seeing the possible options that maybe were open to me. Because when you're feeling really frightened, you can't realistically see all the options. You don't think as creatively or as adaptively. And I think that's part of what happened. And that year, it's like, it kind of gave my nervous system some time to reset and to kind of decompress and to feel safer and kind of this deeper sense of trust that like a trust in my own resilience and resourcefulness that whatever I did next, it would be okay. Like I would be able to figure it out. And so, yeah. And then I just ended up talking to a number of people that were kind of in this line of work, psychotherapy, who loved it and who validated, like, I think you would be good at this. Like the person that I work with now, who sort of started the center where I work, he met me a little bit before that happened, a couple of years before. And when I took that time off, he was like, if you do this, I want you to come work for me after you finish. I'll start referring clients to you as soon as you can start seeing clients. So things started, how Joseph Campbell talked about when you start to follow your bliss, doors open that you never knew were there.
Right.
That's what felt like happened for me.
Right. That's fantastic. If we only, I guess that's kind of the idea of that gap year, is to kind of have that break.
Yeah.
As opposed to just keep going and going and going and going and going. And you never really get that time to be able to have that self-reflection.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely something I'm going to, recommend for my daughter to have. It was never even an idea when I was in high school, college, to take a year off.
So great because like somebody when they're 17 or 18 years old.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, how do you even know what kind of major you might want to pick or what you're even interested in? So limited what you've even been exposed to. So
yeah. What Zoe said to me the other day, she said, so in college, do they teach you how to do all that real life stuff, like pay bills? And, I said, no, you just kind of learn that. And she's like, well, they should. And I thought about it, I'm like, it's actually not a bad idea to teach you what the real world is like. Maybe not necessarily paying bills, but give you kind of a truer sense of what you should expect, coming out of 16 years of school,
right?
And then just kind of jumping into it, rather than have this kind of culture shock thing.
Or I even think, the stuff that I end up teaching clients, self-regulation, ways to, tools in working with depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
These are things that we should be teaching kids.
Yeah.
They're like the basic life skills of how to be happy.
Basic life skills. Yeah.
But that's not usually what's being taught.
No.
We're looking at a year on cursive, though.
Right. Okay. The first line, when I read your bio, the first line I thought was just really telling. And it just said so much. I'm gonna read it. You say, I just spent a large portion of my life trying to do it all at the expense of just learning how to be. Or how to just be.
Right.
And if you were kind of fortunate in the sense that you were laid off, so you did have that time and the ability to do that. What do you think are good ways for people to be able to do that if, they don't have that kind of opportunity in their own lives?
The best way that I know is mindfulness practice. And I don't think it has to be formal mindfulness practice, meaning you have to carve out this amount of time to sit and pay attention to your breath. Because it can be, there's research showing that informal mindfulness practice can be equally beneficial. But by that I mean just learning how to pay attention on purpose to what's happening in the present moment. And that's not ever, it's not how we're wired as human beings, because we're wired to survive, not to be happy. But it's something that I had no practice in doing at all.
Right.
And so I mean, I think just, like I tell people all the time, like, you can wash the dishes mindfully. You can, fold the laundry mindfully. It doesn't have to be this rarefied experience where you are in full lotus posture and on the cushion. It's like any of those things are things that you can begin to learn how to just pay attention to what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. And that for me has been the thing that shifted things the most. Mm-hmm. I feel like it saved my life. I mean, it really did.
Right. I wish I would have talked to you an hour ago because I was doing laundry, so I could have.
Like, so
100% cotton. Okay, so what do you look forward to most in your work? And right now, what do you find to be kind of the most rewarding part about what you do?
I mean, there's so many things that I love about it. I feel like kind of a nerd when I talk about it because I'm like, oh my God, like I remember when I would hear people talk about loving their jobs before I made the switch. And a part of me would be like rolling my eyes so hard, right. Maybe not outwardly, but internally.
Right.
And kind of being like, that's bullshit.
Totally.
Like, nobody loves their job. Come on.
Nobody loves their job, right.
But I do. I love, part of it is that I love hearing people's stories. I'm just endlessly fascinated and curious about, like people's lives and how they got where they are and what their experiences have been. I think it's so inspiring to me to hear kind of the ways people have adapted to get through really difficult situations. I feel like a lot of my work as a psychotherapist is drawing people's attention to their own resourcefulness, calling out like, wow, look at that. Look at what you did there. Or, noticing in our work together, the shifts and being able to draw their attention. Cause it's like, I meet with somebody an hour a week. I'm not the one doing the work. Mm-hmm. In the sense of when somebody makes shifts in their life, it's always the client who's doing the hard work. Mm-hmm. So I love seeing that, like, these practical tools, they work. People's happiness and well-being actually improve from implementing what are usually like pretty small, relatively small changes. And I just think that is so cool. And I love that it's like I'm learning something new every single day. Mm-hmm. And I love getting practice with, it's like, I think you or I definitely grew up with this idea thinking that intimacy between people, it's like it only happens in like maybe a romantic relationship or maybe like with a best friend. And I think it's such an amazing thing to see that, wow, like you can have intimacy even by opening your heart. And so to have those moments regularly with people, it's very heart opening.
That's awesome. That's part of the reason why I'm starting the podcast too, is I love hearing people's stories,
Right. It's so cool.
It's amazing. I mean, just to hear, to take some time and hear what other people have been through, their journey, where they're headed. I mean, just think about how many stories there are out there that we just never hear or never will hear, I mean, it's super, super interesting to me.
Yeah.
Okay, you have kids.
I do.
And like to talk about, kids, your kids, our kids in relation to, the point of where you are in life. Sometimes I feel like people just need to go through their own experiences. You can tell kids or you can tell other people, I've been through this, trust me, or listen to me, right. Let me point out these potholes for you, And at the end of the day, other people, including our kids, even though, as parents, we don't want them to do that. We don't want to see them hurt or suffer or, frustration, all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it just has to happen, How much do you think them going through the things, these types of things is part of the learning curve? How much do you think you will try to instill in your kids, look, you just have to go through the hard stuff?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Like there's just a natural impulse to not want to see people that you love, and your kids, like, especially, you don't want to see them suffer. And I feel like, part of my goal in devoting myself to mindfulness practice was because I really wanted to cultivate the ability to be with another person's suffering without having to change it or fix it. To just be there with empathy and to be able to hold it kindly. Because I know that, like, that's not what I grew up with. And it's not a criticism of my parents, because it's like they didn't have that either. But I know from most parents, when you see your kid scared or sad or anxious or whatever, the natural impulse, don't be scared, don't cry, don't feel this. Right. And it comes from the most well-meaning place.
Right.
And it still can be damaging. And it's like, I really wanted to be able to try the best that I could to not do that when it's happening. And it's like, that is such an ongoing practice for me, because it comes up all the time.
Totally.
Where, Estella will be having like drama at school, and there's a part of me that wants to be like, okay, I should just call the other parents, or like insert myself in there, and be able to pull back and be like, okay, I can love her and be empathetic without having to fix it, because like she's not going to learn anything from me fixing it. Oh, and it's going to erode her confidence in her own abilities if I'm inserting myself all the time.
Yep.
Obviously that's not where Oliver is. So Estella, for people who are listening, is 12. And so she's like in the thick of kind of middle school and the early adolescent angst. And
I know it well.
The kind of individuation of like, wanting to be her own person, but sometimes also kind of wanting to still be a little girl.
Yep.
And then Oliver's too. So it's just so different. But like with him, he's in that phase of wanting to do things by himself. And sometimes seeing that, it's like, I know he's, of course, like I take steps if he's really going to get hurt.
Right.
But like leaving some room of letting him fall and letting him make mistakes and, hopefully gain confidence in his own abilities to do things.
Yep. Really hard to do. Easy to say and really hard to do.
Right.
Now, you have a crazy, impressive, CV, resume of educational achievements. These days there seems to be, I don't know if it's a trend or just kind of like an alternative thought about, a lot of people saying, why do you need to go to college these days? It's just a different world. It's a different time. You can find anything by Googling it. Why do you need to have that piece of paper anymore? But obviously, you have your master's, right? You've gone all the way through and then some, and done really well the whole way through. How important do you think education is in kind of right now, today's world? And how much of that do you think you're going to impress upon your kids to go to college and beyond?
My guess is that like our generation, and probably maybe the one that's sort of in between ours and kids, our kids, that's kind of going to be the last ones where it matters so much.
Yeah.
That's my guess. I mean, I don't know, but, when I was growing up, it's like, even though neither of my parents are college graduates, it's like, that's just what you did, right?
Yep.
Like, you just do that, and then you go there, and then the next thing, and that's what you need to get a good job. And I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah.
I'm really on the fence, because there were things that I learned in college, but I don't know if they'd be worth what the cost of a college education is now.
That's big time, right? And it's only going up. Yeah.
And to think of, leaving school saddled with a huge amount of debt to basically have the qualifications to go work in, you could do admin work or something.
Yeah.
Unless you go into, a very specialized field or something like that. Wow, it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. And I don't know what the answer is. My sense is that still with Estella, she has a really strong desire to go to college. And so I want to support her in that dream.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see how different things are for Oliver 10 years behind.
Right. Well, you and Eli are very forward-thinking people too, so I think.
Well, yeah. So Eli, for people who are listening, is my husband, and he has, relative to me, very little formal education. He ended up graduating from high school, but it was through taking a GED, and then he has classes at a community college. But everything else that he knows is self-taught.
And one of the smartest guys I know, by the way.
But yeah, brilliant guy, super curious, CEO of his own company, multiple times over.
Yeah.
So, he's definitely takes the position of whatever you were going to spend on college, I will invest in you to, if you have an idea, I'll help you fund that.
Right.
So, but she's like, no, I want to go to college. So
right.
That's the dream.
So college it is.
It is.
Right. Okay. So having gone through this journey, you have a couple more. First of all, you have a couple more quotes on your website, which are just fantastic. One from the Dalai Lama, one from the poet Mary Oliver. I'm going to share those real quick, if that's okay with
Sure.
you. The Dalai Lama quote: "We all want to live a happy life and have a right to do so." Fantastic. And Mary Oliver's quote, or it's a poem: "Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight, that leaves me like a needle in the haystack of light. It is what I was born for, to look, to listen, to lose myself inside this soft world." So, having gone through your transition within yourself, and through the work that you're doing now, can you think of any ways that, having all this experience now under your belt, what are your thoughts on ways to help, not just your kids, but other kids and maybe other parents who might be listening, to kind of help them find meaning and purpose and put a little bit more focus on that early on?
So I'm such a big believer. I am almost evangelical about this concept of self-compassion. There's so much emerging research around this idea of self-compassion that's kind of, when we were growing up, there was this idea of self-esteem, right? That we need to improve people's self-esteem because that's what's going to help them feel better, do better. And the idea around self-esteem was, okay, what are the things that you're good at? What do you like about? Let's make a list. And that's what makes you a great person, that you're good at this and you have whatever, pretty hair and whatever the things were. And so there's kind of this speculation that emphasis on self-esteem, part of what that resulted in is kind of this epidemic of narcissism, of people feeling like they need to be special in order to be worthy or to be happy. And the idea of self-compassion is that we deserve to be happy and to be kind to ourselves just as we are. It's just part of our birthright that nobody has to earn kindness. That's just what you deserve. And it's not just the awesome parts of you. It's the parts of you that you don't like too. And I think, what the research is showing is that parents that are able to be more self-compassionate, especially around parenting decisions, parents who are able to model that for their kids have kids who are more likely to feel like they can take risks. Not the scary kind of risks, but that it's okay to fail sometimes. That it says nothing about your worth as a human being. Entrepreneurs who are more self-compassionate tend to find more success because sometimes you have to fail a lot to get an idea that takes off. People who are constantly censoring themselves or beating themselves up when they do make a mistake, that's when it gets really scary to take risks. So that's the thing that I focus a lot. That's the thing that I focus on most in my work with clients. It's something that, I teach classes on it. It's something that I feel like I'm constantly having to practice. So yeah, that would be the thing.
Okay. So we as parents have some work to do before we can pass that along to our kids.
Yeah.
Okay. What is next for you? And do you have anything planned for your future? What are the next steps for you, Danielle, in your business, in your life?
Sorry about that. My next steps, so I'm still in the process of getting my hours, my clinical hours. You need 3,000 hours in California in order to be licensed. And I have about 200 hours left.
Oh, nice.
So I'm very close to the end. And I think my sort of long-term goal is that I would love to be kind of set up in my own private practice, working with people on these things. A lot of my practice centers on working with clients with chronic pain because these, there was this article that came out in JAMA a couple weeks ago showing that, for instance, most incidents of back pain in the United States respond better to cognitive behavioral therapy and learning how to practice mindfulness than traditional medical interventions. And that's not a fringe medical journal. That's the mainstream medical journal. So, and what the research shows and what kind of our experience here at the place where I work indicates is that that's helpful for a whole host of chronic pain conditions. So that's what I'm really excited about working with. I love it. And that's kind of my long-term vision of, working with the orthopedic surgeons around Santa Monica and the physical therapists, because it's such a huge component of recovery. It's there's been such a long standing split between the mind and the body.
Right.
It's they heal separately. And it's really exciting to me that it's okay, now we're starting to see that healing can support each other. The way that we think about healing changes the way that our body heals.
I'm glad to see that there's, actual studies coming out about that, because I've always thought the mind and the body have to be so intertwined. They can't be so separate like that.
That's where it is.
It's all in the same place.
It's part of the body.
Part of the body. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay. This podcast is called Raising Rebellion. And the rebellion part is, about just what we've been talking about, just not being so quick to throw our kids through the system of school, job, career, and, kick them out and hope for the best, right? And more focus should be put on helping them seek out things that are meaningful to them, things that they love to do and love, in life, things that they're good at. What piece of advice do you think you can give to parents or to kids who might be listening on how to become a successful rebel in life?
That's a really good question. Yeah. I mean, honestly, one of the best pieces, I'm not even very qualified to give advice, but the thing that I think compassion is radical. I think that it is revolutionary. It is so contrary to the messages that we're bombarded with, that we're not enough, that we need to buy stuff to be happy, that we need to have more, that we need to buy into this whole kind of thing in order to get to a place of being happy. And it's such a radical position to take that you don't need any of that to be worthy. And that it's rejecting this idea that once you get those things, you'll be happy. I mean, that destination is somehow going to make you happy. It's not. I mean, that was the takeaway message from me of practicing law, because I thought, okay, once I finish law school and I get the great job and I have the nice car and the apartment next to the ocean and then I'll be happy. And this much in the bank. And it's like,
you had that. I
had those things. There was never a time when I felt more lonely and more separated. I mean, it wasn't a function of those things, but it was just realizing, like, whoa, this is not it. This is not what leads to happiness. So to me, that is what's rebellious. So standing up to that idea and rejecting that message that is just like, we're seeped in that. Our kids are seeped in that.
I know. So scary.
It is. I'm like, we have like sort of a very limited media in our house because I don't want my kids. I want their exposure to commercials to be extremely limited.
Yeah, same here. We don't have TV. I know Eli and I have both been cable cutters for a long time now. So yeah.
And it's, I think, man, it's such a helpful thing in terms of not having, I mean, they get exposed to it anyway, right?
YouTube and whatever, yeah.
Exactly. It's unavoidable. But at least having it limited, at least sending the message that this is what our family values. And it's not stuff.
Yep.
So, and, but it's like, you can't give someone else wisdom. Like you were saying, it's like they have to learn that for themselves. But at least that's something, like, hopefully there's some basis there. Just like I think, like having that basis growing up of service matters. That is what leads to happiness. Helping others suffer less. That is something that actually is a lasting and sustainable source of happiness. And stuff isn't.
Absolutely agree. I love it. Your story is just so impressive and really inspirational. And I just want to thank you very much for sharing it here on the podcast and with our audience. If people wanted to reach out to you or to kind of find out more about what you do, where can people find you online?
My website is Danielle Sauce, which is spelled SZASZ.com. Yeah. And that would be the best place, because that links to the other parts of social media that I'm on. And there's a way to contact me there too.
Okay. Your Instagram posts kill me, by the way. Your ability to pun is just, challenged by none other. Let me just say that.
That's going to turn people away.
for the record, no, it's fantastic. I love it. Okay, Danielle Saz is a super student. She is a former lawyer, now a psychotherapist, and really just an extraordinary, positive, inspirational human being. I just want to say thank you for all that you do, for helping others, and thank you again for taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Okay, I'll talk to you later then. Thank you again.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Bye. Quick footnote, since the time we recorded this podcast, Danielle has achieved her 3,000 hours and is now fully licensed to practice psychotherapy. A big thanks and congratulations to Danielle. Our website is raisingrebellion.com, where you can find all of our podcast episodes, show information, and sign up for our mailing list. If you're enjoying our podcast and you haven't already, I'd really appreciate your help by subscribing, rating, and or leaving a review. It helps the show a lot if you do. You can join the community at facebook.com/raisingrebs and at raisingrebs on Twitter. If you know any other Rebel parents, please share our podcast and help spread the word. I really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, go Rebs.
The revolution will not be standardized.